Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Dr. Danisha Keating Show. I am so excited to have my friend Joe here. We're going to be talking today about just a lot of different things, and I just wanted to invite you guys into the table talk conversation. Remember, there's no yelling, screaming, or talking over each other. We're coming to the kitchen table to understand where the other person is coming from and to ask questions to understand them. So, again, no yelling, no screaming, no talking over each other, but we're inviting you to be that fly on the wall to listen to the conversation so you can have these conversations in your own life. So, Joe, I want you to take it away and introduce
Sure.
yourself. Who are you? And let's jump into our topic for today.
Okay. Well, my name is Joe Pollock. I, by trade, I'm a clinical therapist. So I deal with a lot of this stuff, and we deal. I mean, we have a home, not a homeless, but like a home, in the sense that we help people and directing in the mostly county resources that will get them out of their situation. And I'm not talking about just people. I mean, we have a couple of programs. We have a Narcan program that if we see anybody, we have homeless all around our office. And if we see anybody having issues, then we're trained in using that to help them. We also have, like I said, housing, a department that helps people find resources to get out of their housing situation. Not, and again, like I said, not just the people you would typically see on the streets. You can walk downtown in almost every city, and you'll see people lying on the streets, people sleeping under bridges, and it's amazing what these people are going through. But there's also the other side, and that's where I think I come in terms of what how we became homeless, and it's not your typical situation that you would expect to see in most cases.
What is the typical situation that leads to homelessness, and what is your experience that led to your homelessness?
Well, everybody has their opinions, but I think there are a lot of addiction issues that many homeless that you would see on the side of the road, so to speak. And I can't judge anybody for how they got there, but and a lot of people get comfortable in that life. They get used to, I can sleep here, I can dig through this dumpster to get food, and things that no one should ever have to do, but they do it because they don't want to listen to, well, you gotta stop using drugs, you gotta come and live here and do that, and they don't want to do that. And that's what I've seen. But like I said, I can't judge everybody, but I'm in that sense, that's not who we were. um we were a typical family. I was uh employed, where I'm currently employed. That was probably 3 years ago. um I have, in my house right now, I have three boys, but I also have two grown daughters. One grown daughter was stationed with her husband at Fort Benning, and there was, in all honesty, a domestic violence situation, and something that happened involving the family that has now changed my former son-in-law's duty station to Fort Leavenworth for the next 15 years, at least. And so at that point, my daughter called us, and I did what I think any father would do, or most fathers would do, and I went out there and I got her, because she was in a situation that wasn't safe for her nor for my three grandchildren. So we drove, or I went to Georgia, and we drove back with four dogs and three grandchildren in a Jeep Wagoneer. So it wasn't a comfortable ride nonetheless. And so they came back, and we were living in a four-bedroom condo at the time. We were able to get them into the condo for a place for them to live, at least until they got established back here in California. Um, but at that time, they would not, our landlord would not put her on the lease. And so after we drug it out and everything, we ended up my daughter moved out, so she got a place to stay, and my wife and I and my sons were evicted in 2021. And so at that point, I'm like, well, what do we do? And some of that is on me because I didn't, I'm not a saver. If I had been a saver, I would have had a deposit stuck away. But um, getting evicted was a real challenge simply because it stays on your record, and anytime you go to find a place, you know they won't rent to you. And so we thankfully had some money, so we were able to stay in hotels and things like that for about 3 months. But after that, we were basically homeless. And you can look at it in a micro level and see maybe there's something that happened. But I was employed, I had a job, I could pay rent, but because of that eviction, no one would rent to me.
Yeah. And the eviction was because your daughter moved in with you because she needed a place to stay.
Yeah,
And they
and it
said,
wasn't.
sorry, no.
Yeah, no, it was that was frustrating about it. And legally everything was up and up, and that's fine. But it was like, come on, dude, I'm helping my daughter out who needed a place to stay for my family, and
Right.
they wouldn't do it. So
That's so
um,
frustrating because it's so easy to add someone to a lease, but apartments have the right to say, or townhomes or people you're renting from do have the authority to say, no, you can't do this. Now, what shocks me is that they're just like, okay, now you're getting evicted versus just being like, hey, go ahead and break the lease and leave so you can go find a
yeah,
place that you can put her on. They
yeah,
kind of did you dirty there when they did this
yeah.
thing.
And
That
and
makes me
and I
mad.
thought I thought at the time, I thought, what should I have done? I didn't want to leave my daughter and grandchildren in a difficult situation. I mean, at that time they were safe because the their father, and he was not in the house anymore. And so that in that part it was okay. But I'm gonna go get him, and it all work out. Um, and at that point, it kind of became clear that we didn't, it wasn't going to work out exactly how we thought it would. So,
Right.
you know, I mean, like I said, we were okay for a few months, but after that, it's the money runs out, and I continued working, continued doing my job, doing what I thought was the right thing to do, and and then probably later that summer, August, we ended up sleeping in our car.
Mm.
And it wasn't an SUV. It was a Fiat 500X. So if anybody has an idea of what that car size is, there was myself, my wife, and our three boys, and so it was crowded for a while.
Yeah,
Um,
that's not a big car. That's a very small car. When you said that, I was
yeah.
like, wow. So you were still working during
Uh
this
huh.
time. Now, what about the resources, Joe? Because that's what everyone always says. Like, well, weren't there resources for you? Where were the resources?
Well, we went. We had friends. We had people that my wife knew because she was working too. She knew through her job, and so they bugged around like, where can we go? Can you guys, can we get you like the people wanted to buy us or help us buy a motorhome, and then put it somewhere. That kind of kept going, and I didn't stop anything. So I'm like, okay, I just don't want to be homeless. It wasn't good for us, obviously. And so we were in touch with the county that we live in, and it was all the same thing. Like, if the resources are there, like they had community action project or something like that, CAP, I think it's called, in all of the counties. And they never, that it was, the demand was so high that there was just never any funds, and
Oh
to get
wow.
us, because what I needed not necessarily was someone to pay my rent for me. It was just, I didn't have, um, I didn't have the deposit, and because of the eviction, people weren't renting, and we got on the Section 8 list, things like that, but those lists are 4 or 5 years long. And I'm
Right,
like, this
right.
isn't gonna work, you know.
It's so hard. So I've also been homeless. That's actually how we have connected on social media. Where we're just like, hey, you're like, hey, we experienced this, and it's so
Yeah.
frustrating. It's so hard. And the first thing that you said to me was like, it's a lot. I'm older. Like this is like I was young. I was 18 to 24. So I
Yeah.
got scrappy. I could stay at people's houses and things like that. I didn't have kids. So it is harder when you have children with you. And it's like, okay, there's four of us, five of us that you need to house, not just one person. So it becomes harder to find places to
Mhm.
be.
Mhm.
But when a lot of people will say, like, well, Danisha, the resources, I didn't qualify for any of the resources that the county had. Now you had the issue of they didn't have the funding for it. Like you
Yeah.
qualified, but there was no funding for it. And
Exactly.
that's just as hard because it's like, okay, there's the resource that you qualify for, and then there's nothing to tap into. But it
Mhm.
is so hard when you don't have credit and you get or have an eviction on your report for people to rent out to you. That, like, to me, that like baffles me again, that the place was just like, hey, we're putting this eviction notice on you, when you were trying to do the right thing to get her on the lease. I've heard of it
Yeah.
happening in so many situations. But as a man, it is different than a woman being homeless.
Mhm.
I think there's more stereotypes there, especially being older, like you said. I think there might be more shame in it versus just a kid being a kid, 18 to 24. You're trying to figure life out. You've said, like, well, I'm older, and there's this shame of
Yeah.
like not doing enough as the man at the house. What did that feel like, having your kids and your wife in a small car for months?
Initially, yeah, I did feel that way. I'm like, yeah, um this isn't fun. This isn't right, because we we had, I mean, there we go to to use the facilities, so to speak. We would get up at 6 in the morning, go to Walmart, and things like that, and we would get our boys, um, you know cleaned and dressed right there in the park before they had to go to school, um, and so it was hard, but I don't know what you call it. Um, I knew it was going to work out. I knew this isn't what was meant to be. I don't know if you want to call it faith or belief or whatever it is, but I just knew it was going to work out. And like I said, we had people trying to help us with getting a motor home, which I'm glad we didn't, because that would run a whole another set of problems. Um, and so we just hung out, and we had people, of course, where we were staying. Um, we had probably 3 or 4 times, law enforcement contacted us, just because you don't see that often, and offered resources. But it's the same thing. You
Right.
you dial, you call, what is it, 211 or whatever the help
Oh,
number is,
yeah.
and it just kind of cycles through. Call them, call this, and then they cycle you back to 211, and it's like, this isn't that doesn't help, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate for me to see, because the reality is, in today's world, everybody could be 1 month away from being homeless. In a professional situation, you have a job, whatever that is, but something happens and they cut back or whatever. So I think that there's it'd be neat to know the percentages, but I think there are people like me, like we were, and it just didn't, doesn't work out for them. um and they're homeless. They
Right.
don't. I work at well, I work with my school site council at one of my children's schools, and you wouldn't imagine there's probably in a school of 400 kids, probably 50 to 60 kids who are homeless.
The numbers are staggering of how much we have in the homeless population. And I know when they surveyed the homeless population, 50% of them said that they dealt with the foster care system. And they could
Yeah.
be at any age. But it is I don't know what the number is for those who are professionals who have lost
Hmm.
their homes. I know someone
Hmm.
who was homeless when the owner of the home decided to sell the house, and they sold the house way faster than they thought they were going to. They were looking, they were applying, and like there just was no places that were accepting the applications for the apartments, and it was
Hmm.
very like where she wanted to be at first was way too high for her budget. So she started looking further and further, and it would require her to move 2 hours from her home. And her
Yeah.
job. So she was like, "Oh, this is a little rough." So she started looking at renting houses, but a lot of people just were not renting out houses. And so
Hmm.
she became homeless, and it took her
Yeah.
6 months to find a place. And she was just so shocked because she's like, people literally blamed me when it was like my person came in and said, "Hey, we're renting you this home. We're selling it now. It's on the market today." And like she was like, no warning. She's like, get the
Hmm.
house clean kind of situation. And she's like,
Yeah.
wow. And it sold within 30 days. So she's like, how that's not enough time to find something when you are on a budget. And
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you have two incomes. I mean, I live in California. California requires it crazy numbers where I think they came out and said that to live okay in California, you have to make over $100,000. But they're now
Yeah. That's
considering
crazy.
$100,000 to be considered low income for families because it's so expensive here. And
Yeah.
that's where it's wild to me is that, people immediately point the finger at somebody and go, this is your fault. And it had nothing, it was not your fault. And that I think that shocks me. But how did you start moving away from like the shame and the guilt and like blaming yourself for stuff? How did you start moving to a mentality of like, hey, this just happens?
It was like I've always been kind of like, okay, this is, it's almost like saying, I told myself, build the bridge and get over it, and I just had to do that
It's one of
because,
mine too. I'm like, I just got
I
to
had
stop
to be
crying.
focused because I had four people that were depending on upon me to do what I can do, and we got adept at using the McDonald's app and doing different things that were probably what we had to do because, at least initially there was we couldn't cook, so we had to eat fast food, and
Right.
I just I my right now and always has been, my family is the most important thing
Yeah.
to me, and providing for the kids, and my wife, I have to do that. And so it's like I
Right.
didn't have time to feel sorry
Yeah.
for myself.
Yeah. And I get that. Like I remember a friend just being like, "Hey, you can cry about it right now, and then what are you going to do to fix it?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"I don't know." And I
Yeah.
think, there's some a lot of people will use the word unhoused versus homeless.
Yeah.
And I asked someone, I was like, "Why do you use the word unhoused?" And they said, "Because I don't want to feel bad." I was like, "We use the term what's really happening is homeless.
Yeah.
You guys were legitimately homeless on the street. Yes, you had a car, luckily had a car to sleep in,
Yeah.
but physically, how, because I know how I felt physically sleeping in a car, how, with that car being so much smaller and so many people in the car, how did you
Mhm.
guys feel physically in that car?"
We were squished. I mean, my wife and I sat in the front seat, um, and my boys spread out as well as they could in the back. But we also had, some stuff. We
Yeah,
had um, we had the majority of our stuff in a storage unit, but we also have to have, clothes and any water or any food or whatever that we
yeah,
needed that day. And so we were squished. And I'll be honest with you, we've been in our current home, um, about a year and a half. Oh no, I would say 2 years, and I still find myself more comfortable sitting up, sleeping sitting up, because that's how I
Yeah.
slept in the car.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't happen all the time, but physically it was hard, and none of our boys, you know, inevitably one of them had to sleep in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
and nobody wanted to sleep in the middle.
So crammed. The
you
middle
know,
seat's so crammed.
yeah, it was comfortable, and it was not comfortable, and but we kept going. We couldn't stop. They had to go to school. I think I didn't want to change because technically we were living in another city than their school. I didn't want to change school because that was the most stable place for them for those two
Yeah.
years basically. Um, so we didn't do that. And our boys, I mean, the kids are more resilient, and they get over it. And um, I didn't want that to change, but physically it was a challenge. And we did end up getting like a hot plate, so to speak, whatever you want to call it, and we'd
Oh,
cook
yeah.
on the picnic tables. And sometimes we'd be out there cooking in the rain to get, and so it was I look back at it, and it wasn't fun, but I'm like, this was a formative experience for us, in a lot of ways, because I think you always learn through your struggles.
Right.
Um, so we physically, it was just not comfortable, and I'm sure that my wife would say she's more comfortable, sleeping certain ways because of what that went through.
Do you guys have fear of it happening again? Like, has there been that kind of anxiety or fear of
I have
becoming
that.
homeless?
I In terms of that, I will not. I mean, like, basically, I have, I get paid 2 times a month. One is for bills, the other one is for, you know, is rent, and my family knows. I even, my paycheck will hit at like on the 25th, and even at midnight on the 25th, I'll send my landlord the rent. That will not, from my perspective, that will not. Now, could they do this and sell the place, and we'd
Yeah.
have to move? That could happen. But any time I have a place to be, like right now, I'm not. That is a priority. I don't care if we don't pay the cell phone, we don't pay electricity. As long as I can pay the rent, we have a roof over our heads.
Yeah.
That's all that matters.
Rent always comes first. Always.
Yes.
And
Oh
that,
yeah.
I think that's something that since I was 18, I moved 33 different times from 18 to 24 and lived in my car for a full year. And people are like, but you had a car. And I'm like, I get that. I'm grateful I had the car, but it was a bad situation. But I always was like, I need to make sure I pay rent.
Yeah.
I would pay that. And then my next thing was phone because I was like, that's how I get my jobs. That's how I get my gigs for babysitting and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But it was everything else. I was like, that's secondary, third, that's off the list. I don't put that on my plate. But I think I still struggle with having a home. And like, I know we bought in 2020 and then we sold in 2020, last year, 2024. And then we moved closer to family. And there was this little part of in between where we had sold the house in May and had to
Mm,
be out because we sold in 7 days. So we were like, we got to be out. And
yeah.
then we didn't buy the next house until July.
Oh
And
wow.
I freaked out. And I was like, and I was luckily in therapy at that point. And my therapist is like, okay, Danisha, what are your resources? What's different about this than when you were in your 20s? And I'm like,
Mm,
we have money, we have hotels, we have places, we have a car, we have family and friends we can stay with. So I had to like go down
yeah.
this list, but it was still this moment of like, oh, we don't have a place and I have a kid now and a husband and like we are trying to make
Mhm.
this, but we were buying, so it was a little bit different, but I felt like I didn't realize there was that anxiety before when we were renting that I
Mhm.
still was like, oh, we can be out in 24 hours. Like someone could do us dirty that way. And
Yeah.
I felt that same thing of like my rent needs to be every time.
Mhm.
Like we don't want to miss a beat because that I'm not gonna it's not gonna be my fault. But because I've had shady people that I've rented from before who did that, kind of
Yeah.
like, hey, by the way, I'm not renting the room out next month, so bye. And I'm like, ugh. And that's how I ended up moving so much. Was that happened a lot. What advice would you give to someone who is a professional who is homeless right now?
Um, well, you gotta. I mean, if you're a professional in whatever position you are, you've got some sort of education, so you got smarts. Use your resources. Don't count anything out, but I mean, just keep an eye out for things because we got out of our situation because the uh, the place that we were parking our car at night was right next to a church. And one day my son
Mm,
said, my 8-year-old, now 9-year-old son said, um, Dad, I want to go to church. So we went to church.
mm,
Through all of that and our involvement there, we were able to do something. The church had a shower that the pastor allowed us to use.
yeah,
And so we were able to do that. If you gotta, don't close your, I would say just don't close your mind to anything because
yeah, yeah.
you don't know where your help is going to come from.
Yeah. And there's so many resources. I know a lot of people don't think about this, but gym membership is like 10-15 bucks. You can go
Yeah,
shower at a gym.
yeah,
Sometimes the churches, if you call the churches, they know of shelters that you can go change at and
mhm,
shower at. Asking friends, I did that where I just asked a friend once. I was like, "Can I just come take a shower?" They're like, "What do you need?" I was like, "I just want a shower, like a hot
yeah,
shower."
yeah,
And they're like, "Yeah, come on
definitely.
over," but because they didn't have space to be able to take another person,
Hmm.
and hotels are can be expensive, and
Yeah,
that's the hard part. Some counties do have waivers for hotels, but they're limited. It's not going to be the resource forever. But I
yeah,
know I know so many people who have experienced this. I actually saw a lady that was on social media sharing her story, and it was the same kind of similar situation where it was like things were good, she works, her kids go to school, and but she has this hotel room that she's rented and worked out a deal with the hotel to long-term rent because she's like, we
hmm,
don't have a place to go yet. And it's the deposit that's the hardest for her to get. And so she was sharing this experience on social media, and people are like, why don't you just rent a place? And she's like, look, I'm not going to explain this to you again. But
this,
I
it,
looked at that, and at first I judged, and I was like, wait a minute though, like I don't know why she's in this situation, but look what she's doing to make the most of it.
yeah,
And she has kids, and it's just heartbreaking when you think that when you have kids that people would, be like, hey, here's a home to rent. That doesn't always happen. We need more
yeah,
people being people and not just
hmm,
relying on a system to help. But like if people, if you know someone in that situation, I would always say like rent out to them, especially, don't just take the eviction as, oh, they did something wrong. It might be
yeah.
that it was, a situation like yours. How are you guys doing now? Like, how are you guys feeling? How's life going? How are the kids?
I would say honestly, probably I can't bring myself to go back to the city that happened in. I just can't. I just will not. I mean, I don't. I even avoid driving past the Walmart we used to go to, because
Same.
I just would not, I can't do that. And thankfully, we ended up moving to another city, probably 10 miles away. Not a big deal, but and we got through that city that we live in now has an agency that is has a big homeless ministry, and we got together with them, and I said, this is what it is. I can pay
Mhm.
the rent,
Yeah,
I just need you guys to help me get in, and they ended up doing that.
that's amazing.
And so we were it'll be 2 years the end of August that we've been there, and I'm not one of the things that I'm big on, partly because of my profession. I just
Hmm.
think that schools don't put enough stock in social relationships for the kids in a positive way,
Yeah.
and so you know, we had to bring our kids to the school in the other city, and now they're all in it, and they have friends, and I'm like, we're not. I told my wife, I said, we're not moving until our kids graduate high school, because I think that social relationships is so important for them.
Yeah.
And in the sense also that if they ever had to go through that, they would, what we went through, they would have someone, a village, a community, whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
around to help. If we just bounced around, you know, um, that would be a challenge. Now, yeah, I mean, they're in a good position right now. We are. I don't think the boys would say that they, have, you know, really think much about it, but I'm sure they do, because it's kind of hard not to, be affected by that.
Right.
You know, so they're all in their schools and having fun, as much fun as kids can have in school. But, um, you
Right.
know, my wife and I think we're probably more affected. Like I said, I won't go to that. I avoid that city at all costs,
Yeah.
because it just has memories of, oh, look, that's where that happened. Oh, I remember. Yeah, we and and even now in the cities, things are changing. I mean, you can't do what we did now, because the cops will come by and they'll give you a ticket and kick
Yeah.
you out. But I think we're dealing with most of it, um, psychologically, and I have to find myself to get involved in self care, more often than not, because I can't be who I need to be for my kids, be who I need to be for my profession. In order to do that, I've got to be, you know, um, taking care of myself.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's hard because yeah, on one side of things, you have families that are in your situation who end up homeless. And then you have people who are homeless who don't want to change their circumstances, that really are just they've gotten accustomed to being on the street. They're like,
Yeah.
this is great, this is easy. And that's really where the laws are supposed to like really hit home on like, hey, this person's sleeping and breaking into stores um
Hmm.
to steal versus the family is like, we're just needing a shower. And those are the ones who are getting ticketed because they're the ones who are going to go in and pay it
Yeah.
versus the person who's homeless and doesn't care is they're just going to throw the ticket away and be like, you can't find me. And I think that's such a hard balance for our cities to try to take on. But I do wish there was more resources that would actually benefit families of things that could go quicker because of that, or an
Yeah.
exception for a place, either a home or an apartment, maybe like an exception form that they would do to say, hey, this is the court can show you that this is why the eviction happened and not
Yeah.
because of something they did wrong. But it's sometimes I find that anything government assisted, it takes a lot longer to get approved for. It takes a lot longer to kick in.
Hmm.
Can be a really great resource, but there's a lot of red tapes. And that makes it a lot longer for families to actually get the resources faster. They're not getting the deposit or their rent for 3 months when they needed it 3 months ago. So this is where people can step in. This is where churches
Hmm.
do step in and organizations do step in to say, hey, we don't need the red tape. We're just going to step in and pay your rent today. So if you run out of city resources, always look up organizations or churches as well to help. Like you
Hmm.
said, don't count a church out. That's where you guys were able to take showers. What other advice would you give to anybody in your situation? Or is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think being humble, because at least initially it's humiliating. And like you said, for men, it's, kind of breaks them down in the sense of, well, I'm not providing for my family and I'm not giving them what they need. Um, but you have to humble yourselves, because even with the organizations that we were helped by, you still have to pay the do the paperwork and all stuff, because it all ends up being funded by the state anyway. And then there's donations and stuff, private individuals, things like that. But you still have to fill out the you know income forms and all of that. And you just got to walk, take one step at a time, because I mean, and anything government or help involved, it's going to have a stack of paperwork, and you just got to be able to be patient and walk through that.
Right.
Um, it's one step at a time, because there's a lot of stuff going on. But once you get there, you're there. And I can't, just the reality of being able to sleep under a roof for the first time, 2 years ago, basically. It was just, we didn't have any of our stuff, but we had a roof, we had a home, we had a bathroom, thank God, that we could use. And that's a challenge. Some people don't want to, families break up, they go separate, and all of that, and that's unfortunate, because everybody needs your relationships. But when you're in that situation, you just can't give up. You can't,
Yeah.
and it's easier to give up. You can see the people who are on the other side of homelessness. You know, they don't give up. In terms of they're pushing around these huge carts, and I just like, how can you do? I couldn't do that. But
Yeah.
it's just the ability for anybody in that situation to push through. You know, in terms of, if you're, I think Winston Churchill said, if you're going through hell, keep walking. And so that was, those 2 years were hell, and I can imagine that's any person that's homeless, especially
Right.
with family.
Right.
That's hell, and you have to keep walking. You just gotta stick to it.
Yeah, and it's definitely taking it a day at a time, and being. I think one of the things that I wish I did a little bit more was, in the beginning, I wasn't as vocal asking for help. I
Hmm.
kept it hidden. I didn't tell anybody. I made it look like I was sleeping the night at their house, but I didn't actually tell them what was going on. And I think if I was a little more vocal, people would have been able to
Hmm.
get those resources a
Yeah.
little bit faster to me, or be willing to, rent a room. Because there was a few times where it was like I had spoken up, and someone's like, I had a room and I just rented it out to somebody
Oh
else.
yeah.
And it would have been a better solution long term for me. But it was just hard because there was a lot of guilt and shame there. And a lot
Hmm.
of my friends at that point were at college and doing well and getting jobs that were career based. And I was just feeling like
Yeah.
I was kind of just flopping at life and
Yeah.
failing. So just keeping that, like, be honest with people around you, because they might have that resource you're looking
Hmm.
for. Is there anything else you'd like to add before we end?
No, I think that's about it. Thank you for the opportunity. I think
Yeah.
that, like I said, so often we don't see that, that
Right, right,
it's not anybody's fault. It's just something that happens, and
right.
you have to walk through it.
Yeah, and it's hard. And if you guys want, you guys can reach out to Joe or to myself. You can leave comments, ask questions, but be the
Hmm.
hands and feet to people who are out there,
Yes.
because people need help, and there are a lot of people out there who are struggling right now, that are not causing the behavior to happen. It's things like the
Hmm.
person's house got sold where they were renting, or the apartment changed the rules, or whatever have you. But it is a hard situation, and if you guys could be the
Hmm.
community to those kids as well, so that way those kids can get resources, so they're not, just kind of being unseen. But thank you
Yeah.
so much, Joe, for sharing your story. And if you guys
Sure.
have anything else, you guys can leave comments, and we'll go from there. Have a great day, everybody.